Is China's debt bomb about to explode? And what does this mean for the yuan and global markets? Next on the Energy News Beat Stand Up.
Is China's debt bomb about to explode? And what is the impact on global markets? Holy cow, Batman. In a stark admission during a September 25 press conference, China's finance minister revealed that every penny we spend is borrowed, highlighting the precarious state of the nation. Michael, let's go through some GDP debt ratios. Compared to other economies, China's debt to GDP ratio is about 312% in 2024. The US is currently 123%, and Japan is 255%. Holy cow, Batman. The yuan is in trouble. China's debt crisis isn't new, but a new data points dire picture by mid 2025. Social financing and broad measure of credit in the economy stood at 430 trillion yuan, fueled by aggressive borrowing to stay growth. This is also including all of the bankruptcies that they've had. They've had a horrific real estate plummet at 8.5 in 2024, crippling over 70 different related industries. They are having a ruck in China, so to speak.
Yeah, it's really interesting here. A lot of this debt, as you mentioned in the article, kind of roots back and traces back to their infrastructure boom that they have, the real estate speculation, a lot of the stimulus that they decided to do post 2008 financial crisis. And you noted an interesting fact in here. Local Chinese governments are barred from direct borrowing. So they can't actually borrow money, which basically relies on these debt instruments that come from the government. Now, the issue is a lot of this debt is bad. So there's this concept of, as you note in here, extend and pretend strategy, where this new debt that they get issued refinances the old debt.
That's right.
Very interesting. Very interesting.
The big guy, only the main guys can extend debt and pretend to be in control.
So then my question for you is, Stu, what does this mean in the war against the dollar? Because everybody was saying that the yuan is going to take over the dollar in the near future. But this article seems to point that, not so fast.
Not so fast. They are just as bad as the U.S. and Japan, the three biggest ones. When you sit back and take a look, which we're three monkeys in a bathtub trying to scratch each other's back. That's the horrible part about this thing. All of us have fleas and we're trying to pick the fleas off of us. This is not a good situation to be in. And I believe that if the United States can get rid of the Fed and go to a gold or silver standard and have actual everything go back to gold, we will heal as a global economy.
Yeah, it really is true. I find it fascinating that people are making this, and I think, again, what does this mean for the energy markets? This quote unquote their push for clean energy over there in China isn't really going to help, because if they're going to need debt to continue to do that, their net zero goals are going to continue to be delayed. So anyone who's thinking that China is going to become the leader in net zero, good luck.
No, they're putting out 2 coal plants a month, and the only reason that they are not broke is because they've printed all the money they can. Let's go to the next story here, Michael. ExxonMobil seeks to recover billions lost in Sakhalin's first exit. Is this the first step toward ending the Ukraine war? And Michael, this is very a low-key article. You've heard me say that the only way that President Trump is going to get President Putin to the talking to the table is by a business deal. Well, ExxonMobil said they're not going to be participant as energy, as an export, as a service, unless they get reparations or paid back billions. So they're in talks getting their billions back. And I'm like, this is really, really exciting. They may be able to start working on Sakhalin again, because in the bigger picture right now, Russia does not have the extra capacity to do any increasing in oil, which is going to affect the markets. To recap, ExxonMobil held a 30% operating stake in the Sakhalin 1 project, a massive oil and gas development of far east coast, pre-war production around 220,000 barrels per day. So when you sit back and take a look, this is a precursor to ending the war, in my opinion, if it is done correctly. And we can quit listening to the cotton picking warmongers. If you're a warmonger in Congress, shut up, check out, clock out, and go home.
I'm not sure we know where you stand on that. So we may have to hold another segment to figure out exactly where you stand on that. I do find, again, to kind of follow up with that ExxonMobil CEO, Darren Woods, while he confirmed that there are ongoing talks between the Russian officials and his company, he made it very clear, quote, "We have no plans to re-enter Russia." So they're mainly just looking for their capital back and not necessarily to re-enter Russia. So yeah, maybe it's a preempt to end of the war. I think Exxon is just doing what it's best for Exxon and the shareholders. So if there's a bridge being built here, great. Do I see it happening? Probably not.
No, but I'm hopeful. And let's go to the next story. Oil jumps as Trump pushes Europe to stop an all energy purchases. Michael, I have not laughed so hard. You have got to read our Substack article that I put out with Trump's talking to the UN. You all, green energy is catastrophic and y'all are bad. You're going to die and you're going to be totally bankrupt if you go to green energy. That's about as bad of a Trump impression as I can do. It's green energy is crap. I mean, this is absolutely the most funny thing I have ever seen in my life. It was fantastic. When you go through, energy is in an era when the United States is now thriving like never before. AI is green and all bankrupt. Y'all are losers. I'm a winner. I think I just busted out laughing at the whole thing. Was absolutely hilarious. But the geopolitical fallout out of this is he basically said, you all need to stop using Russian oil and gas. And currently they use 17 to 18% of the EU uses Russian natural gas right now. So he's not going to put extra sanctions on until they get to that point. But Michael, I did a crayon, and that extra 17% will put Germany, the EU, bankrupt. That extra 17% will bankrupt the EU. That is how close to bankruptcy they are. Can I make myself any clearer? They can't get off Russian oil and Russian natural gas.
No, they can't, because at the end of the day, people want to have air conditioning. They want to have their lights on. The more modernized you get as an economy, the more oil and gas and energy you need to spend. So I think it's funny. I mean, selfishly, I think Trump is trying to prop up the LNG markets. I think he understands and is starting to get a sense of the drill baby drill is great. It's going to lower energy costs, but then you've got to figure out a way to make your domestic energy business profitable, because if it's not profitable, you're going to keep going in this cycle of production drops, oil prices then spike back up, and you go in this cyclical circle. And he wants low cost energy 24/7, which is probably better off in the, from the nuclear space. So I do find it interesting. I think, again, not that this needs to be said, but I mean, a lot of what he's talking about is U.S. focused political gesturing in order to make sure that the industries that he wants to thrive. And that's, of course, what he wants to do. It is, I think you are right in the fact that Europe's not going to get cut up, or they're not going to stop buying Russian oil or Russian gas. They can't, because it's just so close, it's so cheap. We will never be able to compete economically with what Russia can service the war Europe to. So the real question is what sort of happens from here, and how to maybe we sort of figure out how to solve all that.
But what you're missing is the Siberia 2 pipeline will be absorbing that 17% and taking it to Asia, and they have less than 3 years in order to get off Russian oil and gasoline, period. And they are not going to make it. It is not look good for the EU. Let's go to the next story. Texas ERCOT was okay this summer, but are we ready for winter? Are we wrong to ask? This one was actually from Doug Sheridan on LinkedIn, and I absolutely love Doug Sheridan. Last month, we came across a series of charts and grids on the status, how this continual generation of ERCOT for the 30 days, and he goes through there and he starts describing Michael, let me just give you a brief description. He describes the flow during the summer. Our nighttime peak hour, it stands at ERCOT, would have about 85 gigawatt of gross thermal dispatchable generation, in addition to whatever generation there was from 40 gigawatt of gross wind capacity to call on during that window. And he starts going through and he does the math and the mathing, and he figures out, wait a minute, if this was winter, it would not work because we don't normally have the wind in the winter. So all of a sudden, Doug's right. We've had some real problems. Has ERCOT fixed the bad winter problems in the storm? I don't think they have. This was a great article.
No, it's a great article. I don't know if I have much to add other than I think my response is no, I don't think it's clear. You read this article, I don't think they fixed it. So let's hope it doesn't get cold. But the real question is, could we handle a storm like that winter storm Uri? Probably not. I love I love this thing you put at the end. Are we wrong to ask this question? No, I don't think we're wrong.
All right, let's go to this last story here. Russia's crude flow hits 16-month high on output, rising output and attacks. Russia's seaborne crude exports have surged to their highest levels in a year, driven by combinations of increased production and disruptions to domestic refining capacity from Ukrainian drone strikes. According to recent vessel tracking data, the 4-week average shipments 3.62 million barrels per day in the ending September 21. The export surge. The bottom line is, I think they're at their max. I don't see them, even though they've got a production increase in OPEC plus coming that they're going to be able to do. I think that they're doing everything that they can and producing everything that they can. So I don't see any more coming.
Yeah, no, I don't see it. I don't necessarily see it either. Again, it's clear. We're just gonna say it again. Sanctions don't work because clearly they keep flowing through. And I think partly why it's Trump now saying, well, we just need to boycott them. Just boycott them. I mean, that's all he's got now at this point is just to say, let's boycott them. We know the sanctions don't work. Just please don't buy, please.
Well, and Trump is smart, and here's where he is getting played. I'm going to say this before I was going to say this later, but there's two articles on Energy Newsbeat. One from Andrew Korbicho's newsletter on Substack, and another one that I wrote. Trump just gave the green light for World War III. I didn't write it. I just picked that up from somebody else. I am very saddened by Trump being played by Zelensky, and President Trump, you're a better man than Zelensky. Please stop listening to Zelensky. Stop listening to Lindsey Graham. They are not winning the war. Do your research. Listen to Lieutenant General Flynn. Thank you.
Is he supposed to go on the podcast at some point?
Yeah, he was. Thank you for bringing that painful moment up. This is the fourth time that he's had to be canceled off again, and I appreciate that.
We're waiting bated breath for that one. No, I do. I mean, not to, before we got to jump to finance here, but I do find it interesting that Trump comes out yesterday in what I thought was a great speech at the UN up until he decides to say, no, I think Ukraine can take all the territory back.
What?
I mean, it's brutal.
No, Ukraine President Zelensky has been sold out and he has become a dictator. He's canceled the elections. He is personally responsible for millions of people dying. President Zelensky, go away. All right.
Yeah. All right, well, let's jump over here and quickly cover some stuff in oil and gas finance, guys. Before we do that, let's quickly pay the bills. As always, thank you for checking us out here. World's greatest website, www.energynewsbeat.com. Hit the links in the description below. All links to the timestamps, links to the articles, and subscribe to our Substack, theenergynewsbeat.substack.com. Please. It's a great way to subscribe, theenergynewsbeat.substack.com. Shout out to friends of the show, Reese Energy Consulting. Stu's rocking a signed hat by the aforementioned Steve Reese, the man, the myth, the legend himself. We love everything about them, guys. They are the foremost midstream experts with literally thousands of years of experience in their roster. If you need help at all, if anything in the midstream space, Call them, reesenergyconsulting.com. We appreciate them supporting the show. And finally, guys, invest in oil.energynewsbeat.com. It's coming at that time, guys. Do not give your money to the government. Invest in something that helps America gain energy independence. Invest in something that will diversify your portfolio. Invest in something that will lower your energy burden, and invest in somebody that will come on the podcast, not General Flint. No, I'm just kidding. Invest in oil and gas, guys. Is a great way to lower your tax deduction, lower and diversify your portfolio, and get in on the oil and gas business and support America. Everyone's like, I want to lower my taxes. I'm going to donate to charity. Don't get me wrong. I love charity, but at some point you don't get any distributions from charity. So, and quite frankly, most charities just pocket the money anyway. What does the Red Cross send out 5% of the money or something that they take in? So don't spend money on admin fees. You don't need to be supporting DEI movements within the American Red Cross. What you do need to be supporting is the American energy. Invest in oil.energynewsbeat.com. Stu, prices from an oil jump today. Really, we had a really surprise draw from the U.S. crude oil inventory report. We saw about 600,000 barrels drawed, as it was expected about an 800,000 barrel build. So that's really what jumped crude oil prices up. Currently trading about 64.82. Natural gas down at about $2.87. But I think the sense in the short term is that there's some tightening supply. We've seen some stuff going on with exports both in Iraq, Venezuela, and Russia. Some of the three of the greatest nations in the world. Joke, obviously, but I think it's going to be very, very interesting. Reuters forecasted about a 300 or 235 billion barrel build, but it was some interesting stuff that happened. API yesterday did actually say there was going to be a 3.8 million barrel draw, so slightly less. Very interesting. There's some of these draws. I think it's really interesting. There's also, Ukraine going in there and striking some oil pumping units in Russia as things continue to ramp up. And they actually had to declare a state of emergency in Novodisk, which is a Russian major seaport on the Black Sea that contains a major oil and grain export terminal. So things begin to get really, really spicy. The only other thing, Stu, that we saw, this actually happened on Tuesday. Exxon goes ahead and announces and gives a final investment decision for the Hammerhead development project, which is the 7th development in the famed Stabroek block in offshore Guyana. This is a $6.8 billion project, includes 18 production and injection wells, and will also include an FPSO, which stands for Floating Production, Storage, and Offloading Vessel, with the capacity to produce 150,000 of barrels of oil per day. Pretty unbelievable, Stu. This basically increases the funds committed for the 7 projects to over $60 billion by ExxonMobil, which is unbelievable. They note that almost $8 billion has been paid into Guyana National Resource Fund since that production started in the Stabroek block since 1920. There's about 70% of the workforce is also Guyanese, which is awesome. And it's pretty unbelievable what they've been able to do in Guyana. They're producing about 650,000 barrels per day right now, and they'll continue to add to this in the beginning. So it's pretty unbelievable, Stu, and it's going to be a great thing for them. It's really all I saw, though. I don't know if you got anything else that we missed. Who do we got coming out on the podcast the end of the week?
We got Trisha Curtis, CEO of the Petro Nerds, coming out on Friday. Then we have several others rolling right on through. And so
that's great. We love Trisha Curtis. She's awesome. Love the stuff that she's doing over there. Petro Nerds. We love that.
She is a class act, and we've got a bunch of other ones rolling through. So buckle up and stay tuned.
Awesome, guys. Well, we appreciate you checking us out here on the world's greatest podcast, Energy Newsbeat. We hope you have a great weekend, and thanks everybody for sticking with us. But with that, we're going to let you get out of here, get back to work, finish up your week. For Stuart Turley, I'm Michael Tanner, guys. We'll see you next week.